infamy.
If the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, is a day that will live in infamy, then Tuesday, September 11, 2001, will often be mentioned in the same breath as a day for the ages. 4 commercial airliners filled with passengers, each hijacked at about the same time, each steered off their course, turned into weapons of mass destruction, murderously ramming into the heartbeat and psyche of America. The murderers, extreme Islamic terrorists, each sharing a perverted sense of their religious beliefs, a loyalty to the evil Osama bin Laden, all united in their hate for America. It's a beautiful September morning. Blue skies, no clouds. First one plane, then another. The hijackers piloting into the Twin Towers of New York's World Trade Center, a global symbol of America's financial might. Shortly later, a third plane dives into the side of the Pentagon just across the river from Washington, D.C., a symbol of the strongest military force the world has ever known. Meanwhile, a fourth plane headed westbound has reversed course and is now headed to Washington, D.C., likely the Capitol or the White House, famous symbols of a free and democratic society. But this attempt is thwarted by hero passengers with a "let's roll" battle cry as they overpower one of the terrorists. The hijackers in the cockpit sense failure, so they crash into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, killing all on board. For the President of the United States, it's a day to roll out an education reform package, as the school year is now in full swing. George W. Bush starts his day in Sarasota, Florida. He's promoting his education agenda, meeting with staff and observing second graders for a photo op with the press. One plane has struck the South Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. But all Bush knows at this moment is that it was, quote, a small propeller plane, and likely an accident of some kind. While he sits, smiling, an aide comes over to whisper in his ear, and the president's face freezes for a moment.
I walked up to him and leaned over and said, "A second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack."
The president is calm, but as he will later explain, his mind is reeling. As reporters in the back of the room begin receiving calls with the same news, Bush looks into the hopeful eyes of the children who know nothing, and he remembers his mission.
And the contrast between the notion of an attack and the innocence of children clarified my job. And that's to protect people.
People are dying. The president is nowhere near the Oval Office. Excusing himself, Bush moves into an adjacent classroom and is patched through to the Situation Room at the White House. The first thing he needs are answers. The FAA has restricted all flights headed toward New York City and has closed down all New York airports. All bridges and tunnels leading into the island of Manhattan are closed. Various news outlets are filling their wall-to-wall live coverage with confusing, sometimes false rumors of foul play, hijacking, and speculating about responsible parties. With the clock ticking, it's important for the leader of the free world to project an air of leadership, compassion, and determination to bring the offenders to justice. Returning to the classroom, Bush delivers his first remarks since the attack to a room full of children and unassuming parents and teachers.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
The president heads to Sarasota Airport to board Air Force One, which is fully outfitted to be an extension of the Situation Room in emergencies. And now, the Pentagon has been hit by a third plane. Hundreds of people are already dead. Soon, thousands will be. Some people are jumping from the towers. A horrible attempt to escape from the fires. And then, the South Tower falls.
I remember thinking the first one was likely an accident, the second one was an attack, and the third plane was a declaration of war.
President Bush confers with his staff, including Vice President Dick Cheney. At this pivotal decision point, the two come up with an unprecedented military directive.
The best way at that point in time to protect our country was to force every airplane down. And therefore, any airplane left up would be viewed as potentially hostile.
You and the president had earlier discussed rules of engagement for taking down a hijacked airplane, but you were the one who gave the direct order to shoot down a plane that you were told, as it turns out incorrectly, was headed for Washington.
Right. That's correct.
Just as the second World Trade Center tower crushes to the ground and spews its dust over Manhattan, Vice President Cheney signals NORAD that any unresponsive aircraft is now considered a threat to American lives. The president has full command of his office on Air Force One, but the networks are beating the drum, wanting him to address the nation. After hours of flying in the air and refueling on the ground as far away as the Midwest, President Bush returns to the nation's capital and addresses America.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
George Bush has served as president for 9 months when terror strikes. This day will shape his presidency and affect so many in America, most especially the men and women who answer the call and go to war to avenge the terrorist attacks. America will unite, and it sweeps Bush into a second term as President of the United States. George Bush will become a committed wartime leader, determined to find Osama bin Laden, the architect of the terrorist attacks. But that won't happen until his successor, President Barack Obama, gives the go-ahead to SEAL Team 6 to capture and kill bin Laden in his own home.